WNST. We've thrown it around and kicked it around once or twice a month over the last 4 months, and 115 losses later, Alan McCallum joins us for the 23rd consecutive year of how do we pick the pieces up? How do we win a championship next year or in the future? I feel a little blessed that at least you and I had a little period of time where we were talking about championships and parades and good baseball and well-played games and pitching matchups and all of those things that guys like you and I like. But alas, that's kind of gone now, and the Buck Dan thing, and I know you kicked Dan around a little bit, the fan base, you kicked him around. Nobody kicked Buck around ever. They're gone now, and I wonder what this is going to look like without Buck. Not so much Dan, because I felt like that was a little bit of a puppet character in this thing, but Buck had some authenticity about him and some real Oriole magic about him that I don't know where that's coming from next, Alan.
Hey, Nestor. Look, there are a couple of moments that made the last few years, obviously not 18, even part of 17 was fun for a little while. I remember 2012, early September, and the Orioles were playing the Yankees in a series. I think it was a Thursday night, and the Orioles got down early and then came back with 3 or 4 home runs. I think Wieters hit one. I think Mark Reynolds hit one.
I remember that. I do. I remember that weekend. So did Luke, by the way.
Camden Yards was packed. People were excited. And it felt like for the first time in an extremely long time that magic was back, that there was something really special happening that we were witness to almost out of the blue. And it was clear that Buck was not the architect, certainly crucially instrumental in that. And I give Dan Duquette credit. I mean, those teams wouldn't have been there without him. I do believe that the principal architect of the last few years was Andy MacPhail, but I've said to you on several occasions that Dan Duquette did maybe the hardest piece of it in fine starting pitching, and Miguel Gonzalez and Wei-Yin Chen and Bud Norris at one point, Jason Hamill. I mean, there were guys that shouldn't have been there that made a huge impact, and the one thing Dan did that I always thought made sense was find pitchers who had pitched in tough ballparks. It sort of made sense that they understood what it would take to try and win or at least compete in a place like Camden Yards. Even Ubaldo Jimenez, I mean, whatever you think about him, I understood the logic. This is a guy who had success to random degrees, but success nonetheless in Coors Field and found it again in Cleveland, and I understood the logic. So, I mean, they were certainly principal to, as you said, after 14 losing seasons, what was an oasis in Orioles history at a time that the fan base truly, dearly needed it. They just didn't find the actual water to drink in a timely fashion, and the consequences have happened. Look, there are lots of things you can say, and I'm sure we're going to talk about most of them, but that anybody could have survived after this season, after a last place finish with a complete collapse in September in 17. And then between opening day was great, closing day was great, and virtually every minute in between was a waking nightmare. And nobody had been fired through the course of the season. To have those two principal people survive that, it would have been indefensible, quite frankly.
Well, and I don't know how Buck, I wrote a Dear Buck letter. I'm going to write a Dear Dan letter before it's all over with. And I'm interested what happens in their careers after this, because they came into a terminally ill franchise and at least had some luster about it, right? You mentioned Dan and finding these near major league guys. Boy, there was no pipeline, though, really.
Right.
Not a real pipeline, and obviously the owner being a complete whack job about foreign people and foreign things and setting up Venezuelan and Dominican and in Asia, and Duquette getting thrown out of Korea, amongst other things.
Right.
It's been kind of a wacky time, but I would be honest, if I'm running the Florida Marlins or I'm running Miami, whatever they're calling them this week, I mean, these are good baseball people who survived a really, really bad circumstance in Baltimore and made it work. I don't know that anyone could have taken that job other than Buck Showalter and had this kind of success. I mean, I have great admiration for that part of Buck.
Buck Showalter, I mean, the statement that's being attributed to him that you hear a lot, it's like, I get Baltimore and Baltimore gets me. And I think that's very true. I mean, I think that he appreciated his town. I think, as much as last time we talked, you were asking, do people really care? Yeah, people care. I mean, is it the same as it was in 1977? Well, the world is different, and it's a much more cynical place than it used to be. So, we can debate or discuss how they care, how much they care, but yes, people care. And when you see someone who gives that kind of love to you, and to your town, and respect the history, respect the passion that was and can be again, something that lies dormant, I think that you want to embrace that person. And Buck was certainly that. For all the memories of the last few years, and there are a lot of good ones. There really are. 2014, watching them run around Camden Yards with the AL East pennant was just something that'll live with me for the rest of my life.
Well, you invested a lot in waiting for the Delman Young double.
Absolutely. The memory that will live with me the most about Buck, I think it was in that same series that I talked about in 2012 with the Yankees, and Nick Markakis gets hit on the hand, and his hand breaks, and he's done for the rest of the year. And this is a guy who, still a relatively young player at that time, and had played on nothing but losers, but had been a good player throughout. And he was, they can feel the playoffs. And just a few weeks before they happen, his season is done. And Buck is standing at the stairs going down through the dugout, and Nick comes up, and they just sort of look at each other, and then they turn back to the field, and Buck just puts his arm around Nick's neck and sort of brings his head to him. And that wasn't played for the cameras. I'm sure they weren't looking for anybody to see that. That was an intimate moment between a player and a leader, where they understood the magnitude of what's happening for him. And to me, that is, if you want to understand the greatness of Buck, why the players played for him, respected him, whatever people thought about him in the past, I didn't see his Yankee. I didn't follow him during his Yankee years or his Diamondback years, so I can't speak to that. But in Baltimore, when he was here, the greatness to me, that is the image that I will think of when I think of Buck Showalter.
I'm going to miss the post-game press conferences and the aw shucks and the storytelling, because he had a Billick kind of way, I think, with the camera. And, I know Brian very, very well. And Brian's, literally one of my top 3 favorite people on earth. I think I really would have liked Buck if I knew Buck and talked baseball with Buck. I was never given that opportunity. But he certainly showed well for these pigs that own this franchise, literally, to dress it up and put the hat on and wear the brand. He brought some shine to the brand that's going to be very, very hard to replace. Even when they were losing 115 games this year, there was a little bit more dignity because he was involved with it, and it wasn't Dave Tremblay, or no disrespect to Sammy Palazzo or anybody else. No one that had really climbed the mountain in that way.
What I really enjoyed, you talked about press conferences, was his ability to deflect and reframe. Someone would have a big night, whether it was a starting pitcher or hitter hit 2 home runs or something, and the media would go and want to talk to him about that. And he would immediately say, yeah, that was great. And he would immediately turn to another player, something else that happened on the field, something that helped turn the game. If a great pitching performance had happened that was obvious, he would say, did you see that pitch that Michael Givens threw with runners on second?
Yeah, something he wanted to talk about, that he wanted to spotlight, that one of his coworkers like Rock wouldn't, ask him a question about that, right?
Right. So, he wanted to make sure that in those moments, people saw that there were other things that happened and other players that made an impact on the game. And I think I loved that about Buck. I always thought that was, one, it lets the players know that he sees that he's seeing a lot of what's happening, that he's certainly not talking about himself. And it's easy to talk about the thing that stands out, but that he would make a point to say there are other players, there are other things that matter, and the respect that he would offer to the opposing teams. I mean, I think that there was a lot to say about that. So I mean, yeah, there's a tremendous amount to respect about Buck. And you're absolutely right. Having him come to Baltimore at the moment that he did brought a credibility and a respect back to the team even before they started winning. That made a huge amount of difference to this franchise, whether it was getting players to consider it, getting people to see us, to remember the team when it was good, whatever you want to call it. There are lots of ways to frame it, but having him come here at that time was important. That said, he's also the man that put the worst hitter in the history of the sport in the middle of the lineup virtually every day that he was on the field in 2018.
Well, he's also the guy that left Zach Britton on the bench, and that, was the centerpiece of my dear Buck farewell to him. And, there's no way that doesn't stick to you. That doesn't not stick to you the same way that Billy Cundiff missing a field goal or, anything that happens in one of those moments, even though in the Cundiff case it was Harbaugh who should have called a timeout. But nobody ever talks about that, right?
Right.
But in the case...
the fact that the Orioles had only scored one run in that game and were clearly not good enough to go deep into the playoffs, so it didn't matter.
I never say that, dude. I mean, and I, being in the middle of it right now, as we are, watching this unfold with Indians and Astros and Red Sox and Yankees and who's going to win over any weekend, I can't say that the Colorado Rockies couldn't have done it this year. They just didn't do it this week at all, quite frankly, right? So that's how you get run out of the playoffs. But I thought the Orioles' best chance to win, my friend, was the Yankees in 12, Game 5. I sat in the upper deck. I bought a seat. I went with this wonderful man who grew up in Oklahoma with Mickey Mantle. I had this incredible, I remember telling you about it. I had this incredible baseball experience that night. And being alone, because I didn't have a press pass, I was afforded this incredible night with a guy who reminded me of my father. It was an incredible thing. And that game felt like, the Game 4 was incredible. Game 5 was cool. The whole part of it. And I thought that was the year they could have won, much more so than Kansas City, because I think if they would have laced it up with Kansas City where they were and Davis not being around and Kansas City's bullpen, Kansas City was a better team.
No Davis, no Machado, no Wieters.
Right.
Look, all I'm saying, you're right. You get in the playoffs, anybody can win. All I'm saying is that I was listening to one of the playoff games, listening to it the other day, and they were talking about, Dodgers, that they just grind at bat. And it's funny, because everybody did it except Manny. But, they grind at bats, much like the Yankees did in the late 90s, and much like the Red Sox do now. And they're not, as much as they have power, their game is much deeper than that. And you know as well as I do that the greatest struggle for these Orioles teams over these last few years is that such free swingers, and by the time we got to 2016, all the guys that helped supplement that, Markakis and Wieters and Steve Pierce, who were impactful for a lineup of guys that were just pure free swingers, Nelson Cruz, were gone. So that's all you had. And, they got through most of that season on the strength of, Manny Machado being a great player and guys having decent years, and Mark Trumbo having the biggest year of his career that was hard to believe was ever going to happen again. So, the pitching was suspect with Ubaldo and Wade Miley, and Dylan Bundy at that time was in the bullpen. So I was pretty realistic about not the expectation of them going deep, but look, you're right. They certainly could have. My point is that there were other things in play. As you said, they scored one run. He had other options he made the wrong choice, but there were other realities happening for Buck in that game.
Alan McCallum is our guest, of course, our baseball and Orioles historian. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Strategic Factory. Whether it's hats or shirts or printing, if it's marketing and it's about making your business brighter and better, Strategic Factory's got solutions for you. We're going to be telling you about that and educating folks about what they're doing up in Owings Mills. Learn more at strategicfactory.com. Also, Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air, where the games are on all week long, including the Ravens game on Sunday for my 50th birthday. I'll be in Nashville, but if you're in Bel Air, join our friends up at Buffalo Wild Wings. Say hello to Joe and the crew up there. Get some wings, and the food was great up there last week. The company was even better. Nick Boyle came out. We did show your soft side, as well as Swab for the Bone Marrow Registry for There Goes My Hero. So we'll hope to see you up at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air sometime soon, and I'll have some more events coming up there as well. Charles Newsonoff & Sons has been here since 1923, and you know the true love comes in many shapes and sizes and all sorts of forms. There's something for everyone for love at Charles Newsonoff & Sons. You can find them out on the web at charlesnewsonoff.com, where they say, let's grow old together. Al and I have grown old and gray together without a championship here.
Yep.
Where do they go now that it's sort of official, right? I mean, or do you want to read rights on Duquette as well? Because I know we talked a lot about Buck. I feel like this is the swan song of us having relevant things to talk about with the baseball team. I don't know what comes next after this conversation for you and me that sounds anything like I wonder what they might do.
Right.
This is going to be a crazy offseason. A lot of this is going to be with the mass and money and all of that. But who takes this job? And look, Andy didn't go out and say anything when it was all over with. Frank Wren talked to me 20 years ago. I'm sure things didn't change, but I'm assuming working for these kids is at least going to be different than working for the old man. So whoever does step up, some of those ghosts are going to be real, and some of that's going to be, I don't know what's over the hill, but what's over the hill is no longer Peter G. Angelos. I think that's safe to say.
Well, I mean, let's start with the kids and how the organization is being run right now, and we don't completely know that, but I know this. They let a man that they were going to fire, a man who had let the organization get to the point where it was going to lose 115 losses, and I understand that it was spread out amongst Brady Anderson and all the other pundits who were in the warehouse. I understand that. But a person they were not going to retain. They let him take the reins of tearing up a team and starting to set a new course. And that, to me, doesn't make any sense. If you know that it's time to blow this thing up, they had it. Let's say mid-May, because I think we all knew by mid-May. I knew by the third week of April, but by mid-May, I think everybody knew this was not going to end well. Okay. And with all the contracts running out, they were going to have to make some moves to do some things. So that means 2.5 months of time to figure out what you're going to do, to interview people, to let people go, to bring somebody in, to chart a course, and to start making these moves.
And to either fool Dan Duquette into running the place or thinking he's running the place. The media was leaking that he was sticking around. I mean,
right.
I'm sure he was treated like garbage the whole time because, I mean, everyone that knew him that I knew told me he couldn't wait to get the hell out of here. But then in the summer, they give him the keys to the kingdom and say, here's all of our gold. Go barter it away with the natives.
Right. So, I mean, none of that tracks for me. So in terms of trusting the process, they started off on a really bad foot as far as I'm concerned. Dan Duquette did some good things for this organization, particularly in 2012. And I think that he set some things up in 2012 that made a lot of sense moving forward. And then sort of systematically started to do idiosyncratic things after that. And I'm fully of the belief that up to the point that he tried to we used to go to Toronto, he had control of the organization. So, I mean, I said it before, I'll say it again. If he lost control, that's on him. That said, he took a shot when his star was on the rise. I understand that. And his star is certainly not there now. So Do I think he'll get a job in baseball? Sure. I mean, I think people respect his mind and respect some of the things he's done. I would be surprised if he was given a general manager position anytime soon. That doesn't mean he can't work in a front office or do other things or be a special advisor. I mean, there are lots of things that he can do.
Well, now he looks back on his career and say, Peter Angelo's blocked me from running a franchise.
Right.
I mean, wow. Just one more guy that thinks Peter's evil, right? Like, literally. I mean, especially if he winds up at some, in a scouting capacity. Now, keep in mind, dude was blackballed, right? So,
Right.
Peter's got that to say, like.
Right. It's not like he was, he came into Camden Yards on a chariot made of gold to start with. So, look, I said this before, I'll say it again. My ultimate problem with Dan Duquette is that you mentioned Korea. I mean, how many people walked away from him and this organization saying, nobody talked to me? And that didn't just happen in 2015, 16, 17. That started in 2012, Nestor, and went right through to Jonathan Scope being traded away saying, nobody ever talked to me about a contract. Is some of that hyperbole? I don't know, maybe. I don't think that that Manny would have signed, but I would have liked to have had them try harder. There are certainly things, and it's easy to position yourself. Look, I know firsthand as a person who does customer service for full time in my life that people will say things outside that are true or not true or maybe skewed to make themselves sound better. So I understand that some of that is at play. But the narrative was extremely consistent with him. Nobody ever talked to me. And we talked about Adam Jones, and you talk about the kind of cachet that Buck had. Adam Jones has cachet in baseball. Adam Jones is respected in baseball. And if Adam Jones wants to play in this godforsaken town, on this godforsaken team right now, and I don't know whether he still does or not, that Dan Duquette couldn't see the value going forward in having that guy who is respected be able to speak positively of his organization, so that maybe not in 2019 or 2020, but let's say hopefully 2021, a team that's young and might be ready to step up, whether he's there or not, whether he's still a starting everyday player, which we could debate whether he is now or not anyway, to have him go out and say to guys, hey, this organization, for whatever you've heard, they treated me well, they do it well, people are happy to be here. That matters amongst baseball players. That matters in the industry. And to have that player, the guy that from the moment he got here as a kid said, I want to be a leader, I want to embrace the town, and did walk away with a bad taste in his mouth about the organization.
Well, we knew that was going to happen, right? Like,
well,
that would have been my snark and my sarcasm and the dick in me over the last 10 years, that anytime I write to Adam Jones, I would say, you don't know what you're talking about. I've lived through it all. In the end, you're going to get abused like everyone else. Even though he made $90 million, right? In the end, you're just another guy. And I guess that's part of the Dear Adam Jones letter that I haven't written to him yet, which is, it's not you, it's them. And I know you want to be beloved and you want a statue and you wanted to be the big man around town. They just saw you as a center fielder, dude, and you're not even one of those anymore. And, you just move on, and that's the way they treat people. Ask around, ask around as to how it goes here. Paul Blair didn't get any special treatment. He was a better ball player, so there.
For me, that's part of the legacy, not all of it, but that's part of the legacy of Dan Duquette for me, that despite his knowledge, despite his acumen, despite his ability to recognize talent, and I believe that's true, he was not the person that I wanted going forward. So who is that? Who's the next person? What's going to happen going forward? I have absolutely no idea. I know I don't like the way they've already started the process. I like that they have said that they will hire the general manager first. That person will hire the manager, and that person will make the prime decision.
It sounds like there's a flow chart. They're at least trying to draw it out in some sort of format for us, right?
And that sounds like it makes sense to me. I hope that happens. there are certainly talented people out there, and I don't know. Do I think that Dan Duquette's haul from the summer is worth building on? I guess we'll have to see. There's really no way to know at this point. The guys we saw so far certainly didn't set the world on fire, but it's early and they're young. But the Orioles have an opportunity right now, but they can't sit back. They need to hit the ground running with a plan, which means they need to hire somebody sooner as opposed to later.
Well, and sooner is sort of like now, and the baseball playoffs going on right now. Alan, always good to sort of set a perspective on all of this stuff over all of these years. I am really interested that everything that bleeds out, every story that's told, how the whole organization is run from the minor league level up, all of that now becomes some sort of a blank canvas, right? And I don't know whether John and Lou Angelos dig that, appreciate that part of it, but that's what it is at this point because it's so bad that it can't really go anywhere but up. And, Luke says they won't lose 115 next year. They might not lose 100. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. It can't be any worse than 115, right? They can't lose 116. But
so the thing, Ness, is you look at the number of teams that lost 100 or almost 100 games this year. I mean, the Orioles were standing at the top of the heap, but they weren't alone. So, I mean, there are a lot of bad ball clubs out there. So to say that it's impossible for a team to make a significant leap, it's not impossible. I mean, there's the competition isn't as vast to get over, maybe in the American League East, but in terms of being respectable in the league, is not impossible to do that. Is it likely? Of course not. But they have to do things. They have an opportunity, and they have to do things right and smart and timely to take advantage of the opportunity that they have.
Time will tell, and time is short, and we are watching. At least you and I and Luke are on this around here. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll stay in touch and hopefully come see some rock and roll. I'm disappointed I missed Diana Ross, but, maybe next time, right?
Australian Pink Floyd was pretty fantastic as well, and there's good stuff out there.
Good music on the way, man. My wife and I saw Bruno Mars last month, and I'm still, I still got that Uptown Funk thing going on. So, life is good. Uptown Funk and Stevie Wonder. It's I saw Lenny Kravitz. It's been a funky sort of 50th birthday for me, Alan. So, I hope to go over the top here with Steely Dan at the Modell this week. So, good stuff ahead, good music, and no baseball games to lose, at least for months and months, and hopefully a good World Series ahead. We'll chat again before the month's over.
Sounds good, man.
Alan McCallum, our longtime friend, can be found, Alan, at WNST.net. And whenever his band is playing, I'm always the first one to let you know about it. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships digitally each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to be involved and $5 to join. It's a lovely thing. PlanetFitness.com, right around the corner where it's going to stay warm in all winter and you get your workout in. Also brought to you by our friends at Laurel and the Maryland Jockey Club, where the Maryland Million is being held next Saturday. That's the 20th down in Laurel. You haven't been to Laurel lately. They're going to have baseball on there that day, as well as the ponies. You can bet ponies on the track. It's a good time. Get down to Laurel. Hang out. Watch the ponies. Lovely fall day, the Maryland Million. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first on our WNST Tech service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.